You're tuning into the Wild, Weird, and Sometimes Normal podcast. If you have a story or a guest recommendation that you think others need to hear, email me at wildweirdandsometimesnormal@gmail.com. Let's get this started. Alex and Brett, kick it!
Wild. Wild. Weird. And sometimes wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. And sometimes normal.
Are you looking to buy a home in New Jersey, escape the city and move to the suburbs? Finally purchase a vacation home on the lake or down the shore? Maybe you're one of the lucky ones who are retiring and moving out of state. If so, let me help you. Keller Williams and the Real Estate Professional Group have what you need to make your goals come true. Reach out and have a conversation with someone who will put you first. Contact Brian McCoach at 856-321-1212 or email brianmccoach@kw.com. Welcome to another episode of Wild, Weird, and Sometimes Normal. I'm your host, Brian, and today my guest is the Paranoid American. We did a little pre-taping conversation. I'm not sure if he's a PSYOP, if I'm a PSYOP. He is ex-military, ex-Disney, ex-Lockheed Martin. He may have driven flying saucers that we're talking about here. We are going to find out the truth on this. What's happening, man? Thanks for coming on.
Technically, you pilot them, you don't drive them, but it's just a small money.
As a first-hand experience, you would know this. You pilot them.
So I've heard.
Yeah, so you heard. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about a whole range of things today.
Yeah, so I saw that you did the comics of like conspiracy and occult things, and then as just talking to you, I found like so much more. What got you started in this whole world?
So this was actually started with music we were just talking about and trying to put conspiracy theories into music. That's kind of the short of it. And that turned into being able to get some of my music placed with like really big artists. And I had some music placed on Adult Swim. And I remember seeing my music followed by my favorite cartoons. And I was just like, man, now I want to do the cartoon that came on after the music. So it just started this whole trajectory. I had been a lifelong comic book fan and, doing just like scratch artwork. And I decided to like go into art school and actually learn how to do digital animation and everything pertaining to it. And that wound up with me pitching the idea to a couple studios and realizing I had nowhere near the budget. I didn't have 1% of the budget to do what it would have taken to make like a full-blown pilot. I was 20 or something. So I scaled back and I started to work on just the storyboards, and the storyboards turned into comics. And I never left that. I just fell in love with the medium and I've been there ever since. That was like 15 years ago.
If I ever put on Cartoon Network and a song that I had was either played right before like Master Shake of Aqua Teen was on, or like he was humming it, like that would just like I would just retire at that point. Be like, hey, I made it. This is it. Shake knows me. Like that's the most important thing.
You think so, but I was like 19 or like 20, so it was hard to retire at that point. You know what I mean? Like it was just like peanuts, and Ted Turner networks weren't sending that much in royalties. Like it was not retirement money.
You got the first check. You're like, Jesus, man, gotta get some more. Like, gotta get some of the Braves. Gotta get some Brave shares.
30 cents. What?
Jesus. So you're saying that you wrote Hotel California about the hotel standard that they all the politicians and the dead people end up there. This you were the Eagles' inspiration for this hit. You sent them the music.
That's correct. Actually, Aleister Crowley learned everything he got from me, and then he gave it to the Beatles.
Wow. I am in for this. That's awesome. So you started with music, and you're still doing music. That's great. When did you start exploring other mediums? When did you what's your background on this? Like, so we kind of look like relatively the same age. Like you grew up like in the 9/11 era. Like,
yeah,
where did all this come from?
I turned 40 last year. So going on 41. So I grew up and I was actually in the military during 9/11. I was in boot camp on the training pad doing like marching drills. And then all of a sudden, everyone was ushered inside, and then they sent us back outside with like safety vests and told us to hold flashlights up and look for anyone suspicious and gave us whistles. I swear to God, none of that. And it's so silly in retrospect, realizing what had really happened. And it's like they sent me out there with a whistle and a flashlight. You know what I mean?
You see a plane crashing into here, just blow the whistle. Everyone will know to run away.
Well, they didn't even tell us anything about 9/11. I didn't know. No one in my flight knew anything about 9/11 until 2 weeks after it had happened because they didn't want anyone to like not be focused on training. And probably they didn't want a bunch of people writing in and being like, maybe I'm not going to do this anymore. How do I get out of here? So they kept it secret. And yeah, that was one of like the big weird defining moments where I remember my parents talking about everyone knows where they were when JFK was shot. And I was like, man, I wonder like what president's going to get shot that I can say that to all my friends about. And it wasn't quite, it was like maybe the OJ Simpson case, but then 9/11 happened. And that's the thing, right? That's the thing where everyone's like, I remember I was driving or I was, watching TV and I don't have that. Like I didn't get that bonding moment with my peers.
Hey, there's plenty of time for many presidents to come and go. You never know. You can still have your moment. OJ, I'm East Coast, so like I vaguely remember watching like the NBA on as they were breaking into, hey, the OJ chase is happening. I'm like, what? Like OJ, like from the Naked Gun? Like what's happening here? Like
Yeah,
not
dude, the
fully
Naked Gun guy.
comprehending.
The Hertz rental guy. That's right.
Yeah, I'm
So
like, isotoners, is that mad about something? Like, all right, man, deep breath.
to answer that, so like as soon as I get out of the military, or like actually while I'm in the military, I start working at a recording studio because I really wanted to do music. I have been playing music since I was like a child. And I got far enough, again, like I got placements, and I just realized at a certain point that's not necessarily what I wanted to do full time. It wasn't the lifestyle that I wanted for myself. And I just like turned hard into, well, what if I start doing like music videos? And I really like doing the special effects. I had done a little bit of 3D and flash animation. In fact, when I was in the military, I was I was a computer programmer in the chair force. And I was one of the only people in the military in the 2000s that was actually getting paid to do flash animations for the military. So that's kind of where I cut my teeth in the military doing animation. And I was like, there's a non-military version of this. There's a civilian version of this that's really cool. And that's kind of where it started. That's where I got the bug.
That's awesome. So you're saying you were in boot camp, right? So 9/11 happened. But then you said chair force. So it seems like maybe a better office job. Were you shipped overseas with this? Did you go to Iraq or Afghanistan?
Almost. So I got reclassified as an MP, and I was gonna because I had a top secret SCI clearance because of some of the data that I got to work with, and because of that clearance, they wanted to reclassify me as a military police, send me Afghanistan, where I was essentially going to be escorting like plumbers to like fix toilets in the top secret parts of the base because I was a glorified escort at that point. So we had a little difference of opinion on how desirable that was for me. And I ended up rejecting the anthrax vaccine to the point where I went through a whole LOC, LOR, big chicken dinner, a whole bunch of Article 15, a whole bunch of things over that. So I like to call myself a vaccine hipster. Like I was getting kicked out of the military before it was cool to get kicked out of, like everyone thought I was an absolute idiot, like an absolute moron. Like just do it, bro. Everyone's doing it. You'll hazard pay. And so there's a much longer story to it than that, but that's the short version.
Man, that's wild. So now we were talking about before this about strikes on YouTube for mentioning, maybe certain things that happened in March of 2020 and like that whole V word. So now I'm on my second strike, man. So I'm not taking this out. It's in there. I'm just going to hold you accountable for it. I want those 30-cent royalties that you're getting sent over here to cover my major expenses here.
That's dried up, dude. It's weird. Like only a lot of that came from a show called Run's House and Yo Mama, but only plays in VH1 in like Belarus now. Like they don't even play it in the States anymore. So
you need to take off in like Southeast Asia where there's like a billion people and you're just like, where am I getting this check from? This is crazy.
it could happen. They're like 20 or 30 years behind. So I'm waiting now.
Any minute's just going to catch on. They're going to have the girls will have capris and the cargo shorts will come through, and then your music on Adult Swim. They're like, oh, America, I love it. Paranoid, sign this for me. Like, hey man, no problem. I can do this for you.
So that name too, if anyone wants to look it up, it was called Sound Scientists. That's the music name that predates all this paranoid American stuff. But it evolved like Sound Scientists. The characters turned into kind of like a gorillas duo where they're going to be like these animated characters that were investigating conspiracy theories. You can kind of see like the roots a little bit. And then the Sound Scientists turned into a comic book called Time Samplers. And that Time Samplers is that animation that I was trying to pitch to Adult Swim and I was trying to pitch to some of the studios. And then they were like, oh yeah, 70,000 roughly for like a 4 minute, pilot. And it was like, whoa, this is not the same sandbox that I thought I was playing in.
Yeah, is this in pesos? Like I can handle that. That's a little bit better.
Not even, man.
Yeah, that's tough, man. That's tough. So, Paranoid American, the current state of our country, of our world, I wouldn't say that's outlandish to have as a title. I don't think that's, out of line. When did you start with this? Like, what was giving you that idea?
The name was 2012, but the comic, that Time Samplers comic, started in 2006. That's when it was like, okay, I want this to be a real thing, not just a dream or a thought or like a doodle in the back of a notebook. Like, what'll it take to make this a product and put it out so that other people can get it and I can promote, like all that. So that was the start in 2006, and it took about 6 years to materialize between what the hell does a comic book script look like? Just in black and white and words. It was a brand new concept. How do you orchestrate this? I had been working at Disney since 2006 as well. Like, it started right around then. And even after working there for half a decade, and like I left after 10 years, but after working there for half a decade, I was like, I've seen how like the guts are made, right? I know how the sausage is made. I know about what the project managers are doing and how to coordinate the artist and the VO and like all that stuff. So let me give a stab at it. So yeah, it took me 6 months or 6 years to put together a 20-page comic. But after that, and after I got my footing, I just kept getting better and faster and having more ideas. So that's earnestly when it really started. And the name Paranoid American was something that had been cooking a while. My girlfriend actually suggested it to me, just because it was like I absolutely had just like American flags all over the place, part of my brainstorming board, because it was like I know I wanted to be like a patriotic, like I was thinking Federal Reserve. It's not actually part of the government, but damn, what a name! Like, it sounds like it's like a government. So I kind of wanted something like that, and Paranoid American ended up being the closest one, and I really liked it.
That's awesome, man. So I'm sure as you're working at Disney and you're trying to like think of this, your idea that you're doing very alternative to Disney, like this kind of has to like be kept under wraps. This can't really, it doesn't really seem that Disney be welcoming to this idea.
A little bit, although like I was the time that I really got into the biggest headspace for doing this was we were brainstorming on some big project that was going to be in park, and they bring in these big guns, and the big guns are these animators that worked on The Lion King and a few other like major, blockbuster Disney animations. And I just remember like looking to my left and looking to my right, and there was people over here that had worked on like Oregon Trail and Carmen San Diego, like the all the things that made my childhood fun. Like, those people were in this room, and I was like, man, like what if they were drawing, MK Ultra stuff, or what if they were working on Project Paperclip sort of, cartoons and comics. And that was like, I have to make this happen. So yeah, I couldn't just go up to anyone. Like, I couldn't go up to the Lion King animators and be like, hey, what do you think about 9/11? You want to draw about it, But I did work with the people that I was closest to. So like my lead animator, the lead artist that was in my department, I was like, hey, would you work on a logo? And then a logo turned into like, oh, a character sketch. And then before you know it, they're drawing like government assassinations or like Barry Seal falling out of planes. And like, they don't know what the hell they're drawing. And I ended up getting some really popular like Marvel DC comics to draw sketches of all the key characters from the Franklin scandal, which is like a very deep and dark conspiracy theory. But it was just like, here's the pictures of the guide, here's some key notes. And that's where I was like, this is something, man, because I don't know if there's anyone else that has access to top tier artists working shoulder to shoulder. It's also like, hey, now draw the Bavarian Illuminati. Hey, let's get a sketch of Adam Weishaupt, because all we've got are like some rough ones. So it was like a calling almost. You know what I mean?
That's awesome. I just had this interview, Eric Pickernicks, and he was writing these satirical novels type of thing about conspiracies and UFOs. And as I'm talking to him, it turns out that like he didn't believe like in any of this. And it's like halfway through a conversation, he's like, maybe I chose the wrong path. I don't know. He's like an older guy too. And I was like, you don't believe like in any conspiracies, like JFK? He's like, no, like Oswald was the only one. He's like, and that Pizzagate's nonsense too. I was like, all right, hey, mainstream Pizzagate is that there's a dungeon in the bottom of Comet Pizza, and Alafante, like he's just this nice guy. He's like, hey, don't bother looking at his Instagram, like whatever's been washed. I was, and but I'm like, that's really not like truly Pizzagate, but okay, fine. I was like, but like Jeffrey Epstein, like, isn't that kind of Pizzagate? You're talking about like high level, and he's like, yeah, well, like that's not even proven either because he was killed or he died. That wasn't even proven because he died. I'm like, what are you talking about? And the Franklin scandal was like popping in my head, and I just didn't get that out in time. And I was like, that's another one that's all under this like Pizzagate umbrella that happened to get rolled up in what was like 2012 or 14 or whatever it was coming out, and that just happened to focus on this pizza joint, this guy, allegedly, I don't know, there's some emails came out, Podesta email, very strange stuff. $50,000 worth of hot dogs being flown down from Chicago.
Handkerchiefs and walnut sauce,
Can I
and
please get my handkerchief back? The pizza
doing
handkerchief? Like, can I please?
sacrifices to Moloch in the backyard with chicken bones. Yeah,
Yeah, small
but
children will be
normal
in the hot
political
tub
stuff.
for you at 8 p.m. Like, don't like, it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, ignore all that stuff. I was like, but like the Franklin scandal, like legitimate, child boy trafficking for males, really disgusting stuff. But, it kind of seems par for the course for people in power.
And that's actually one of those things that I was like, how do I take this dark and horrible story that if you even search for the word, you'll probably get your internet revoked for a week, if especially if you're at school or work. I don't recommend searching for that. But how do I make that more accessible to the normies? So I actually have a comic book recently called Frazzle Drip Funhouse, which is essentially Five Nights at Freddy's gets revenge in the bait, like one of the animatronics in the basement of a pizza place comes to life and just goes ham and just, punishes everybody in all kinds of gruesome 80s, like, X-rated horror ways.
I hope this turns into reality. I hope this is, arts like mimicking like, nonfiction, does art imitate life or does life imitate art? I hope this comes true.
What, and you were saying that, there's some conspiracy theorists out there, at least people that are writing the books and making the material that might not believe in a lot of the conspiracies. And Franklin's Scandal's a really good example because the first book that really, I think, exposed it was by John DeCamp, and that was called The Franklin Cover-Up. And then years later, there's another author called Nick Bryant, and he wrote a much thicker book called Franklin's Scandal. And his approach was like, this sounds crazy. Like there's no way that this is true. And that there was all these rumors about like Hunter S. Thompson's assistant being involved with like Bohemian Grove, like very specific claims that sounded so outlandish. So he starts looking into it, and he himself was like, wow, this actually has a little bit of meat to it. So I would recommend to anyone that thinks that Pizzagate or any of that stuff is just complete BS, look at least for Nick Bryant's Franklin Scandal and just see if any of that seems even a little bit plausible, and just imagine what the version 30, 40 years later might look like. That's kind of what we're talking about here. But I can sort of relate to that too, because I don't really believe in every conspiracy theory, although I'm fascinated by all the info. And one of the stories that I started working on that resulted in that documentary about adrenochrome was a comic where, like, what if a bunch of kids got on the dark web and they ordered adrenochrome? And then I was like, well, how would you actually use it? Where would you get it from? What would it look like? How would you consume it? What are the actual effects? There's got to be some wacko on the internet that's already done this. Can I just go and find that? And that led me to a whole like, wow, there's way more to this than I ever thought.
Yeah, I'm sure. So if children took adrenochrome, would this be like Benjamin Button, where they would reverse back to like little babies, but with, like their current like 12-year-old faces and be like, like scary looking mini baby?
I don't think so. I mean, the real answer to that is that they would just start tripping. They would just start hallucinating wildly, but only if it was good adrenochrome, because there's good adrenochrome, there's bad adrenochrome. And that actually was a huge point of contention, even in like MK Ultra days when they were testing it. The scientists that were getting results from adrenochrome compared to those that were saying it was inert, the ones that said that it was not inert were basically like, you guys don't know what you're doing in the lab, and your egos are too big to admit that you don't understand how to synthesize it properly. And instead, you're just saying that it's bunk because you're making bunk. You know what I mean? Like they were the Walter Whites, essentially, like talking down on everyone else. But it's like you wouldn't know these tiny little intricate details. And usually the majority prevailed in this case, and the majority said, no, it's an inert substance.
So we talked about, you might not believe in you don't believe in all conspiracy theories, but you like to know them. And that's kind of where I'm at too. I like to collect them like baseball cards, I like to say, and like to know all of them. But like, hey, that's not my favorite player. He's not in the Phillies, man. That's not
Right.
my team, but I like to know about him. Like Otani on the Dodgers, like I could care less about the Dodgers, but every time if I could watch his at bats on like a NFL red zone type of deal, like I would watch this Babe Ruth type of character. But his success, wouldn't define my sports fandom.
Yeah, I love Daryl Strawberry as a kid. Maybe not the best player. Maybe he had a really horrible cocaine addiction that ruined his career trajectory. But he has an awesome name, and every time I saw a Daryl Strawberry trading card, I was like, I had to have that. Come on.
Gotta grab it. Gotta grab it. And then, so some of this stuff, it's hard to wrap your head around. But I love going to the FOIA request and just reading like all this old stuff. So we're talking about like MK Ultra, like stuff like that was a conspiracy theory. And then you start seeing it trickling out in government documents. You know, Jesus Christ, the girl in Stranger Things, she does the like the astral projection.
11
Uh,
L.
yeah, but the thing she does, but there were what is that mean? The astral projection? What are they?
Astral projection.
Yeah, but what's the government? They were
Oh,
doing
that
it to
was
Russia.
Project Monarch. Project Monarch that happened at Camp Hero, or Montauk, as some people refer to it.
Right. So, they're astral projecting into Russia to see what's happening in the Kremlin, and or trying to find out where to assassinate people or shoot missiles. And like, well, this is only like a 60% of the men who stare at goats. And they're like, oh, this is only like a 60% like success rate, so that's unsuccessful. I guarantee you that was not unsuccessful to them, and that they just took that underground. So you start reading more of this, and it's like these crazy ideas that you had, or that the CIA would do. It was called Project Midnight Climax, where they would take these guys who were trying to get prostitutes in San Francisco, have a double mirror, inject them like tripping balls the whole time, and just see what is happening to them and document this. And it's like, that's the real stuff. Like, so that's insane. And it's like some of these conspiracy theories are so tame compared to that. Yet here's like the real life stuff.
And that's actually the very first comic book I produced, start to end, was a short story called Operation Midnight Climax, which is all about that entire, it's like a 6-page comic, but it breaks down the George Hunter White, who was that guy that was sitting behind that two-way mirror. And it is wild, dude. Like that story, he actually had a custom made porta potty fitted for his little room because he was so engrossed with being able to watch these officials and hookers just like go crazy on LSD that he didn't want to leave. Like he wanted to be there to observe it all. So he would just sit there on a porta potty behind this two-way mirror, just like watching people go crazy. And there was many different safe houses. That was one of the very first operations set up by Project MK Ultra. But something that's interesting is that MK Ultra itself was in turn inspired by adrenochrome research that dates back to the 1930s. So like a lot of people conflate anything at all that comes out that's like conspiracy related, that might be related to drugs or mind, like, oh, that's MK Ultra. MK Ultra, in my mind, after looking into this for decades, it's MK Ultra is sort of like the boring accounting wing of all the cool stuff going on. Like MK Ultra was essentially pay these guys this amount of money for this thing, what were the results, coordinate it. But the real programs were all those little sub projects under it, with MK Ultra being like, payroll. That's just like the thing that payroll would use to track.
Right. So my entire astral projection stumbling, remote viewing was the term I was trying to figure out. So they
Okay.
did remote viewing, in the FOIA documents. So this guy, his two-way mirror, this was the first reality show. Like he was, the breaking ground on like watching people doing real stuff, and he couldn't even get up. Like he was keeping up with the MK Ultras.
Well, he wasn't the very first, but he was the first one to do it with like both high profile and in the crime world, because George Hunter White had this weird ability where he was both in the government, but he had busted people that were in high crime. I think he had links to Jack Ruby. He personally busted Jack Ruby when he was in the FBN, which was a precursor to the DEA, kind of mixed with the FBI. So like he was right here at the beginnings of the ATF, the DEA, MK Ultra, CIA. He was pre-OSS, which is the organization that predated CIA that was in World War II. So like he's there at all of that. He's the one that is friends with a guy named William Donovan, and he created these guys called Donovan's Dreamers, which was the precursor to Project Bluebird and Project Chatter in the Navy, where they were giving the recruits marijuana, mescaline, meth, all sorts of different substances just to see what would happen. And like all of this again is all predating MK Ultra. Like it comes from this exact guy, George Hunter White. So George Hunter White brings this study with him, and he's like, hey, do you guys want to throw some gas on this fire? And that's what MK Ultra is. That's the gas getting thrown on the fire.
You have like this photographic memory going on of all these names. I'm picturing in front of you, that I can't see the wall in front of you, this like Pepe Sylvia board of just red strings going on, that you're just pulling all these names going. Like this is fascinating.
Well, it helps that I wrote a comic on it, so I'm actually conjuring just all the panels from the comic about this, because the very opening page is George Hunter White sitting on a porta potty, half nude. He's got a bluebird on his shoulder. He's eating an artichoke on the desk. So it's got like it's a memory palace. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but it's basically a memory palace for conspiracy theories.
No, but I need to start doing this for myself. I need to like my little stick man drawings that I can do. I can do this, and then we'll have the Project Artichoke, Project Bluebird. We'll have Project Looking Glass all in there. And as I'm doing this, I can just recall everything.
I highly recommend it, man. Look into there's a book called Art of Memory by Francis Yates, who was a really deep occultist. She wrote about all sorts of memory work, which kind of goes along with conspiracy because a lot of the supernatural abilities that conspiracy theorists ascribe to like the Illuminati and the people that do the spirit cooking or that they're, snorting the adrenochrome or whatever it is, that they get these like supernatural abilities, but it's never quite hinted exactly what it is. You kind of made the Benj Button joke about, oh, you get to live forever. That's one of the supernatural abilities ascribed to these substances. But no one's like coming out and saying, yeah, you can fly. Yeah, you can walk through walls. Yeah, you can shoot lasers through your eyes. But some of the things that these occultists do know is just how to possess what seems like uncanny memory abilities, but really they're just kind of parlor tricks and just like things that anybody could teach themselves. There's a great book called Moonwalking with Einstein that shows how any bumpkin off the side of the street could basically win like memory competitions.
So there's if you meet a new person and you repeat their name 3 times and when you first meet them, and like, hey, Paranoid, I'm Brian. Oh, okay, Paranoid, I like your shirt. And then you're going, hey, Paranoid, well, I'll talk to you later. I'll always remember, I'll associate your face with your name. I know that like presidents do this. They said that Bill Clinton has like the best personality. If you see him in a room, apparently, and you talk to him, he's really good at shaking babies and kissing hands, and he's really good at this. He's a great politician in this. I know this is a proven fact to do. I also kind of find that like as like this cheat thing that if you know it too, and I'm doing it, you'd be like, don't three name me, don't three name me. Like I know what you're trying to do. Like remember me on one, but like I don't do it. Like there's so
Like
many
a
ways I
Seinfeld
could.
skit in there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Like Jerry would get mad at George, like, don't do that to me. Hey, he only did my name two times. He knows me. Kramer wouldn't even have no one's name once, so would know everybody. But there's ways to improve your memory. It's just like working out. I know all these things are good for me. I do. I don't know. I need to stop procrastinating and get on it.
There's another version of that too, where you don't have to say the 3 times is a really good one because of NLP, like it's kinetic and it activates all of your different sort of like anchor systems. But another good way is that you kind of draw like a caricature. And this again is easy. I worked at Disney for 10 years, so I lived around caricatures and I saw all the skills that go into it. But like if your name is, Brian McCoach, for example, I might just imagine your head turning into a big stagecoach. And now I've got this like weird link that is completely unique so that every time I look at you in a party and it's busy, I'm looking for the stagecoach guy, just like you're looking for the guy with the green shirt. But there's the pineapple guy and there's the blueberry girl. And so if you do these kind of things, that's one of the really easy mnemonic techniques to kind of figure out where you take something and you just like blow it up and then you say, okay, now times 10. So now you're like a cartoony Disney stagecoach with like, stage robbers like jumping off the end. They're like firing off their guns. They're trying to like take people off the train. Like the more movement, the more dynamic, the more over the top it is. Now it's like I'm not going to be able to get that out of my head to the point where you're like, damn, I can't believe I still remember this asshole I met 7 years ago at some party because he was like the pineapple on fire guy.
I that's amazing and I'm sure that works. I would get so caught up in like looking at the person's caricature as I'm talking to them that I would have a hard time talking to them. Like actually what's happening in my head is so much more interesting than what's happening in real life with you that I want to step back here and just kind of I want
It
to watch the
happens.
stagecoach rob. It happens. I just get the
Yeah, it happens.
dull glazed look in my eyes and it's fine.
I mean, that's again where like some NLP techniques, like cold reading, works really well. Like if you understand the concept of cold reading, which blew my mind because I remember growing up again with same time period, there was this guy, John Angel or something, that would like go around a room and it's like I'm hearing a C, a Craig, a Cray, and someone be like, oh, that's my uncle, and you'd go over and like, well, we've got a message from your uncle. And I always thought there were so many people that were like, man, this guy is like actually magical. And this stuff was on like this was Oprah, right? This was like modern day primetime TV for everyone that was home ironing. And years later, I realized those techniques that he used it's the same as improv. Like one of the rules of improv is always say yes. And it's like never say no kind of a deal. And it's the exact same thing for cold reading. And you go back and watch these fortune tellers or these people that were mediums for the dead and they're always saying like yes and it's exactly the same as that. So even if you get yourself in a situation where you've been thinking about stagecoaches for the last 4 minutes and then someone's like, yeah, so anyway, what do you think about that? All you're just the best thing is just to agree. Like if you just agree right away, it's like the most obvious diffuser. And a lot of the time when someone's talking and explaining it, like they just want to hear a confirmation anyways. So I know like knowing all those little techniques, especially in a situation like you brought up early specific one, if you're in a room full of like lots of people and you're doing this to a bunch of different people, no one's expecting you to remember every life story. Like they're just there to mingle anyways. So it's about measuring like the environment and figuring out what techniques are there.
So before Oprah started promoting, John of God and, child baby factories and possibly those children going off, she just had these hucksters coming on and doing cold readings for people.
Yeah. 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 Before she cleaned up her act and she started really vetting people.
I love that she just switched to Ozempic or whatever the drug is, and then like she had to leave Weight Watchers. She's like, "Well, that stuff's nonsense. I'm just gonna take this magic pill a day," and then she's like, "Just keep your shares too, because like you guys are just trash right now."
I mean, they could always team up. Imagine if Ozempic came out with like the Weight Watchers branded version that came like, and if you buy this one, you get an extra 50 points this week. You know what I mean? Like you start haggling with them. There's something there to it.
So my son is 10 and he just started playing Fortnite, and it's like his whole world right now. And I don't know how often they have new campaigns come out, but they just had Ninja Turtles. I think it was a campaign you could buy Leonardo or whatever. So he wanted $10 for that. And I was like, man, like I get the game was free, so maybe I should have viewed it as like, hey, I'll give you up to $40, like whatever a game cost.
That's how
I
they
was like,
get you, man. That's
but
how they
that's not
want you to think.
right. So at first, so I was like, all right, man, I'll give you the $10, no problem. And then they just had these gods and goddesses. He's like, oh, dad, I need 10 more dollars. I was like, dude, I was like, every 2 weeks they're gonna have some. Like, I'm not giving you $10 every 2 weeks. Like, this is what's coming out. But he's like, no, it's like the $10 is really like 1,100 points, and they're so smart. They don't make a point to a dollar, or even anywhere you could be like, $10 is 1,000 points or 10,000. Like they make it higher, so you think you're getting more value. And this is what Weight Watchers has to do: is every 2 weeks change their campaign and like, oh, Ozempic Plus. Now you can get 60 points instead. Hey, buy this now. Buy our, Weight Watchers thing and go for this. But just devious, man.
That's what I'm saying. Well, they're really good about it. And I think that's a really good version of this, right? Because if $11 gets you 11,000 coins, a lot of the time, the discount and buying something in bulk, it's the difference of like 5 points, which is equals like 0.05% of a penny. You know what I mean? Like it's inconsequential. But for something like Weight Watchers, man, if you're counting every single calorie and it's like, oh, I earned an extra 5 calories today, like I can chew that piece of gum like a few extra chews now. This is actually recalling one of like the earliest conspiracy theories growing up is there was a lot of sort of like TV infomercial about this guy that wrote a book about natural cures. And the whole commercials were always like, the government, won't let me show this book. They've banned it. They don't want you to know about natural cures. And the natural cures was just like, drink lemon juice to cure the sniffles or, it wasn't that simplistic, but essentially the whole marketing campaign was like, this is what the government doesn't want you to know. They're preventing me from letting you see this. But for 1999, you can see everything that they're banning. You know what I mean? But I love that. And I have almost a nostalgia for how ubiquitous paranoia and conspiracy was in like, I don't know, 80s, 90s, especially in those 90s, man, where every cartoon, I was going back through and I do another show called Occult Disney where we rewatch every single Disney animation. And we had just recently watched the Doug movie, and the Doug movie came out in like 1999 or something. And I was going back to watch like some of the old Nicktoons. And just like without it even being part of the plot, there's all these scenes where as you're walking down the neighborhood, just like cameras are popping around and like a cat will pop out and the cat will have like a security camera, like everyone's spying on you. And it would have nothing to do with the plot of the show itself. It was just, again, ubiquitous that everyone was always like, aliens are here, the government is spying on me. Like you just took it as fact and it wasn't like a political stance. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just get that same kind of nostalgia thinking about that.
So Doug and the Beatniks and Killer Tofu, they were subliminally putting things in my consciousness so that I would figure this out later.
Well, if you think about it, the very first episode of Doug was about the nematode, I believe, where they're trying to find the nematode, which is a cryptid. They're basically going Bigfoot hunting in the first episode, and that's the also the plot of the first Doug movie is they're trying to find the monster of like Lucky Duck Lake, which again is a cryptid, but the cryptid was created by government colluding with corporations and they were polluting the lake and they were all in on it, and he tried to report it to the newspaper and the newspaper reported it to the government, and they sent the ATF after Doug with guns and they kicked down his door. It sounds like I'm making this up. This is actually the plot of the Doug movie.
This is like, prequel to Ruby Ridge. Like Doug was ahead of his
Right.
time.
But what I'm saying is that like the conspiracy angle was so ubiquitous, and I think it was because we had kind of grown up in the middle of, our parents went through JFK, but then we got Ruby Ridge and Oklahoma City and 9/11, I guess, towards like the later. But now, man, like all these new conspiracy kids are weak. They're just growing up with like germs.
So revisiting some of those 90s conspiracies like Ruby Ridge, Waco, like I just watched it. Like I didn't know at that time, like the news was real, and watching it and going back and like, Jesus, like you murdered this guy's like wife and his dog because you wanted him to saw a shotgun below the legal limit. And then he gave it to you above, and you went back a second time. Like, actually, I need you to take another quarter inch off. And at that point, then you're like, hey, this guy's doing illegal guns. But you look at, I don't want to see the FBI is all bad, or any government agency as a whole. As at the top, I think they need reforming. But I guess the low level street agent, I would like to think that some of those people are in there for the right reasons.
Hmm.
You
I
want
don't
to
know,
be
man.
the. I would
Uh,
like to think that you signed up, like, hey, I want to be like Keanu Reeves and Point Break. Like, I'm going to be a surfer, like undercover, and go help out and stop these bandits.
It's more like the
That's
movie In Too Deep with Omar Epps, where he literally goes in too deep and he starts becoming an actual gangster and he starts fighting with cops because they become his enemy because he's so entrenched in that culture. And being in the military, I distinctly remember this weird transition that after I got out, I realized like, oh, for the longest time, and this sounds bad, but I swear this was ubiquitous, but it's like it's us and the civilians. Like you would go out into the normal world, you'd be wearing your civvies, your civilian clothes, but everyone else you see around, you're just like, look at these chumps with their slouched backs and buying their stupid crap. These civvies, they got no idea what the real. And then, like once I got out of the military and that transition, it was like, man, what a weird mental space to be in. But part of that is kind of like the reason that you're in the military and part of that indoctrination. So if something were to pop off, like you have that just inherent feeling of like, no, 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 I can push everyone out of the way. I'm here. And it's kind of true. You know what I mean? But all it is a mental switch.
right. I'm pretty sure the point of boot camp is to break you down from your normal social norms and then like, kind of decommission you from like your family and your friends tie. And now your unit is your new family and friends. You'll do anything for them. You'll do anything for, the head of the unit that's telling you what to do. So like the father figure, like, oh, like whatever he says, like I'm going to listen, I'm not going to question. In the ideal world, the father figure.
Yeah, that mixed with a stress test of like a person.
Right. And who can hang and who can cut this and who doesn't, just gets let go and you move on. And you'll see it, a lot now. You talk about paranoid Americans, you see a lot of that now. It's like, well, they were enforcing the March 2020, you couldn't go outside, you couldn't go paddleboarding in the middle of the ocean by yourself because they said, hey, we closed the beach, we closed the park. And they're like, but for
If
the
you
most
cough into
part,
the ocean, then everyone's screwed. So don't be the
everyone's
guy that coughs into the ocean.
right. They're going to filter that ocean water out into your drinking water, and you just killed a million people, and it's
Yeah,
like all on you.
you
And it's like,
monster.
Jesus. But they were going through, and typically, law enforcement, military, a broad brush is, love America, love their country. That tends to swing one way politically, and like, how would they ever do, how would they ever be the brown shirts? How would they ever go and march around and do this for the evil regime? And you just see because it's us against them, and you hope at some point it would break apart. And now, we have, not to get too crazy here, turn people off or anything, but you have all these people pouring in through the southern border, and none of them being checked. They're all like 18 to 25-year-old single males coming across. They're getting shipped all throughout the country, and you have one political candidate. It's like, hey, once you reelect me, I'm going to come in and we're going to get rid of all those people. Like, how do you get rid of 10 million people of military age that are, joining up, their backgrounds are very spotty at best. And on top of that, it comes down to like us against them. It's this like really crazy place that like that switch is going to flip, and it's not like, oh, this is my fellow American. Like, no, you are not wearing the same uniform that I am.
Well, if you look at when Katrina hit, right, and the levees broke in New Orleans, they had some of these things going on where they were evacuating towns, but also on the outer ring, the military was going in and they were confiscating people's guns door to door, completely unconstitutional. But it was like, this is emergency times, a special. And what they were finding is that there was some pushback against, U.S. based military troops or police sort of organizations that were like, no, this is unconstitutional. We won't do this. So all of a sudden they start bringing in NATO and they start bringing in like our like assistant backup troops from Mexico. And now all of a sudden they don't have the same qualms about maybe trampling over grandma and grandpa's rights and taking their guns away. So I think that that's probably the most realistic and practical version of all this, is that there's almost like the United States of America combines with, Canada and Mexico. I can't remember what the full name for that used to be. The America
NAFTA, but they changed. Trump
well,
changed it to something.
NAFTA was the trade
The
agreement.
trade
but,
agreement, right?
But there was like a version of that where we actually combine all three and just have like a single currency. There was going to be the Amero and the Euro. But the euro and, the whole Brexit thing maybe like squashed that a little bit. But that concept would have been that, okay, well, if that happens, we just grab people from Honduras and have them police New Orleans. And then if something pops off in Canada, well, we can just send, like Floridians up to Canada where like they don't have the same sort of familial ties. Or you send them into like French Quebec and they're just like, oh, this isn't even North America anymore. Like, we're in Europe. We can shoot these people.
Right, you're not going to have anything to, it's not apple pie and grandma and baseball and hey, let's talk about Doug from the '90s. They're like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about,
Yeah.
and they're giving me a check and letting my family stay here, and it's to shoot you.
I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to, man. And you mentioned too, growing up about like Waco and looking back and not realizing what was actually happening. And that was the same thing for Oklahoma City. I just remember it being on TV and it was like a thing that was happening. And it's like, okay, yeah, there's a building falling down, and I'm sure that, people are getting hurt in there. But man, that right there, the Oklahoma City bombing in McVeigh is one of the weirdest rabbit holes you could ever go down that is still happening today. There's a thread called PatCon that I don't know if you ever heard of the phrase PatCon before, but it comes from a book called Aberrations in the Heartland of the Real that's all about Timothy McVeigh and how not only was he not a lone wolf, but that he was like military trained. He was an absolute tech nerd growing up. He was into like X-Men and Cyclops and Wolverine and Star Trek. And he ran an internet board on like an old modem. Like, he was way ahead of the curve. He wasn't this like bumpkin redneck idiot that played with guns and then ended up, making a kablooey thing. Like, there's a weird backstory that ties into all that. And PatCon is this thread that says that, well, maybe even going back to Ruby Ridge and before, all of this has always been FBI and ATF trying to like instigate stuff. It's always been like these agent provocateurs every damn step of the way. And man, Oklahoma City is the one where I think that they lost their footing and they got sloppy. But by framing it as a sort of extremist, right-wing, racist thing, that no one really looks into it. Or if you seem like you're defending it, it's like, well, what do you have against black people? It's like, whoa, where did that come from?
Right, and then you invoke like dead children, and it's like, how dare you? Like, children were murdered. Like, this isn't this? Like, yeah, like I can also hold multiple thoughts in my head at one time, and like look.
Or if you bring up Epstein and it's like, oh, get your mind out of the gutter. That's disgusting. It's like, what, like, just knowing about it means that you have also taken part in it.
Right, you have sympathies for what was happening. No, I have sympathy for the victims. I don't have sympathy for the person doing it. And like, the only way to stop this rot is to acknowledge what is happening and figure that out.
Well, I'm glad that we stomped that out, though. Like, he's dead. He's gone. Point
We don't worry about it
proven.
anymore. Thankfully, he was the only one that ever did this, ever. It'll never happen again.
Well, the ones that were doing it were like, whoa, we don't want to go to jail and die when the camera's off. So we're gonna cut this out. We're gonna go back to just, selling acai berry bowls.
It is going to be interesting. DeSantis just signed something, I guess last week, maybe earlier in the month, and it is releasing the Epstein Florida documents, that everything that they got him originally in trouble, I think in 2007. And then Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyer just came out and was like, well, those documents are going to exonerate my client because based on the deal that Epstein took, it was that nobody that he was associated with could be prosecuted for these crimes. So they're sitting here and going like, well, guilt or not guilt, she's got a get out of jail free card, which is just fascinating.
I'm actually happy to hear that the Free Ghislaine Maxwell campaign is starting to become successful finally. It took a couple years to get there, but we all knew she was going to pull through. We're with you, Ghislaine. We're here for you.
Finally got the 100 signatures they needed to make
Yeah.
it official. It's like,
And they say change.org doesn't work.
Here it is.
Here's your proof that it does.
in the flesh, man, in the flesh. So we're going back, maybe I misspoke, whatever I was saying that I hope that some of the ground level FBI or three-letter agencies like were there for the right reasons.
Well,
And we
those
can
ones
go-
get killed. That's Terrence Yeeki. He's the guy that gets shot, and it makes it look like it's a suicide because he was like, "Hey, this isn't right." Those,
It's
I mean,
the
I feel
OKC guy, right? He was the Oklahoma City. He went
yeah,
through.
he was the first responder, black officer that he ends up, shooting himself in the back of the head. Or I can't remember the exact circumstances, but
I
he's
think he
found
hung
in like a
himself
white
and
police
shot
car.
himself.
Yeah, he was messed up, man. He was messed up in the head.
Yeah. With like all these cuts and bruises on his body and blood inside the car. Then he walked like hundreds of yards away from his car to go do. I was like, none of that makes sense whatsoever.
Well,
But
and then you
went-
look into like Ken Trenadu, which he had to that. This is the craziest part of the whole OKC, in my opinion. That Eric Holder, I believe, the Fast and the Furious guy, he was directly implicated in this because apparently one of the guys that was rumored to have been involved with OKC had a very specific tattoo, like a dragon tattoo on his arm or something, and he had a very specific look, a big beard and everything. And coincidentally, there was literally another guy that had the same tattoo and the same kind of look. And he's like, I'm not the guy you're looking for. And they don't believe it. And he ends up getting tortured to death because he doesn't admit that he's this person he's not. And come to find out, like, oh crap, there was another guy that looked just like this. And this is one of those examples of them being really sloppy because then they don't take out the brother, and the brother makes a big stink about it and is able to go and talk about it and look into Eric Holden and look into all these other threads that still permeate today. Like these people are still in the government right now.
So the police officer responded, first responder OKC, he walked in there and he saw unexploded bombs still in there. And he went back and I don't know if his wife or his girlfriend, and like it was like unraveling and like what they're telling you is not true. It just wasn't this Ryder truck or U-Haul truck, whatever it was, filled to the brim with whatever farming products they were using, fertilizer and blowing this up. And he went and he was like, there were unexploded bombs as he's helping save people and children and things like this. And this leads to his unraveling of like trying to grasp the truth and possibly being taken out.
In addition to the unexploded ordinances, he also was describing this weird like pancaking effect where I guess the ground rose up and squished people against the ceiling, and then the ground fell back down again, which wouldn't have happened if the building just was falling downwards, right? Because you would look up and you would see like a little, like an Acme splat of a person that used to be there. The other thing too, anyone that's ever seen the movie Armageddon, right? Steven Tyler and Liv Tyler's in it, and Bruce Willis, right? Ben Affleck.
Yep.
It's a good
Celebrate his whole
movie.
career. Yeah,
It's a good movie.
yeah.
The entire premise of that movie was that they can't blow up the asteroid by putting a bomb on the surface. You got to drill down inside of it so that when the explosion goes off, it actually, destroys it. Because otherwise, it wouldn't even like push it away. It would just be a little chunk out of the side. This is the exact same logic with the OKC, that a Ryder truck pulls up to the outside, separated by, many meters, and then explodes and takes down the center of the building. There was an Air Force officer that actually tried to recreate all this and went and did all the same kind of ballistics investigation that got repeated at 9/11. He came up with the exact same conclusions that people came up with at 9/11, that they used thermite strategically placed at support pillars within the inside, that the way that it fell didn't at all correspond to an explosion happening on the outside. It would have just left kind of like a little chunk. So yeah, that is one of the biggest rabbit holes you can go down, is OKC.
Yeah, just very sad that like this gets put in front of us. And at that time, hey, good or bad, like we definitely good. We weren't the security state that we were now, but now you wouldn't be able to do the same thing because there were rumors there was multiple Ryder trucks around that time, and they were trying to figure out which one to place or to get people not just paying attention to this odd one sitting here. Like, oh, I saw 7 of them. It must be something different.
I mean, maybe But we still haven't seen the rest of the footage from
I
9/11,
was
the
just saying
missile that hit
9/11,
the
they went
Pentagon,
and
right?
confiscated all this from private businesses and took all this away. So, the security state at that point, who knows? But,
Well, I mean,
very tough.
just the recent moon landing, right? The first time that we've been back to the moon
Thank
ever.
God we made it back. I was concerned we never would.
Yeah, I thought I'm so happy. And then I go to check all of the live stream footage because clearly that's what everyone's scared. It's like, oh, the streams are down because we don't have the bandwidth to stream it back. And yeah, what a deflationary sort of feeling that comes from that.
And the 4K picture that was sent back only looked so poor in quality because it was 4K. And it's like Elon Musk was interviewed at one point and he's like, "Oh, the only reason that you can tell that the footage of SpaceX taking off is real because it looks so fake." And it's like, what? Like, what do you? What? So it looks like a cartoon. So I'm supposed to believe? I just, dude. They tell you we're morons for believing what they're saying. They show you with like your own eyes and just like a little bit of discernment, and people are still like, "Oh my God, we made it back to the moon. I just can't believe it."
Yeah, you can tell how much love there is from all the war.
Right. Yeah. The beatings will continue until morale improves. Like this is the hard part. So, just to quickly highlight other successful areas of the FBI, they had the Draw Muhammad contest where a FBI informant was filming a gunman walking into this festival to shoot people. And only until other law enforcement agencies saw this person going in and saw this guy filming were they able to stop it. But again, someone else, attached to the FBI let him go in. Just look at any mainstream major gun issue that there were victims, and you can see, oh, he was on the radar. Oh, he was on the radar. Oh, he was interviewed last year. Oh, he was interviewed last month. And it's like, what are you people doing? Like, yeah, I don't want this great database of everyone being, but if you're making it onto their radar for the right reasons for them, for doing it, not that you like to tweet or whatever it might have been, but that there were violence or you're trying to buy something and you're not legally able to, whatever it is. Can you interview them for 5 minutes more? Can you do something else besides just like, hey, go do this for us? Hey, Michigan, when you're going to go try to kidnap somebody and nobody wants to do it, and like 10 of the people of the 12 were all FBI informants, it's like insane.
Oh, like I remember even the black bloc stuff that was happening around and before Occupy Wall Street, and you'd have just these clear evidence of agent provocateurs that didn't realize this was like the first generation that was like, hey, we do have cameras on us all the time. We can record stuff. And that was when they would see these cops essentially dress up like Antifa-esque. This is like pre-Antifa, I think. So they would dress up like these black bloc guys and go and just start smashing windows, and the cops would come and the cops would arrest everyone, and then a few of the guys would get like escorted away nicely, and they would find photos of these, quote unquote, like urban terrorists wearing the exact same boots as everyone else like on the squad was wearing, which by itself is just like one little issue, right? But then you see them like not getting arrested with everyone else or walking away, and then that people were trying to trace back like, well, where did this guy come from? Who brought him? Who invited this guy? So I mean, this goes back until forever, right? False flags have been a tactic even used in ancient war. Like that's always been something, is putting up the false flag and then getting someone to create that chaos and then benefit from the chaos. So I think that that's kind of what the FBI and ATF and three letters, they sort of do. Half of it, I think, is fantasy football, where they're literally betting on like who's going to get the highest body count based on what they know about. But a lot of them too, they look at it as like pen testing. Like so, if you're in like a cybersecurity, there's something called penetration testing, and it's kind of where you sort of hire like a hacker to try and get in and try and hack your system just to see how far they can get, to let you know, okay, we got to reinforce this, we got to add some better security protocol here. So I think a lot of what the three-letter agencies do is they're like, oh, there's a development here. It's like there's an ant that you find in your house, right? So instead of killing the ant, you're like, well, let's see where he goes, what's the food source he's after, where's he bringing it back to, let him go back into that hole, let's go walk around the outside, like letting it kind of play out where you feel that you've got it contained enough to where like, okay, lead me, take me to your leader. That's sort of one aspect of it. But I think another one too is in a morbid, not totally sarcastic way, but man, if no terrorist explosions go off this year, we're not going to get that 20 million anti-explodey terrorism budget next year. it's the same thing as like if you don't spend all of your chair budget, you don't get any new chairs next year. So you better damn spend your whole chair budget every single year so you can go back to the board next year and be like, we spent all the chair budget. We're gonna need a little bit more next. You know what I mean? And I think there's that part of it. Like if things weren't popping off, then it doesn't justify the existence of some of these organizations. And again, not to harp on freaking OKC, man, but OKC was that reinvigoration where it was like, okay, we screwed up ATF, screws up Ruby Ridge. They absolutely screw up Waco to the point where like the public is losing confidence, and not just the ATF, but now the FBI too, because the FBI gets brought in to kind of get like a handle on it in a way, and even that doesn't work. So Oklahoma is that like redeeming thing. This is that situation where, you know, like the evil Superman puts the lady on the train tracks, waits for the camera crews to show up, and then like swoops in and saves her.
No, I completely agree. Right. So the FBI has their budget, and if they're given $10 million for a certain project and they only spend 8, the next time the appropriations come down, they're going to get 8. So they need to spend 10 to say, hey, next year we need 12. And, you know, no matter how you spend that money, you have to make sure that it's spent. And
Well, that's how it used to work. I think they've got their own printer now, so it's less of an issue.
printer go burr. Yeah, that's definitely what's happening, man. Dude, we live in such a weird world with all of that. And you hope so, but part of it is you're saying, no, you want to see the ant inside your house and you're going to follow it and see, you know, where's it coming from and how to get in there. But then half the time it's another ant watching the ant walk around. And it's not even like they're trying to do anything about it. It's like, oh, I let him in here. I'm going to watch. We're actually on the same team. It's nuts, man. Do you see it picking up more? Do you think it's going to pick up more as we're getting closer to the election?
I don't know. I mean, I tend to specialize in like older conspiracies and older things that have like at least a couple decades of info to base on, just because as far back in history that I've gone, there's always been people claiming that this is end times and that things are always going to get worse. And I think that, yeah, things are always going to be getting constantly worse. I mean, anyone that was able to smoke on an airplane in the 80s and now you have to take your shoes off just to get through the security, like that's sort of an indication of things getting worse and worse. But we can also do rap songs where like Donald Trump is praising Joe Biden using AI. So things are also getting better all the time. So I don't know. It's like a constant trade-off that I don't know if it'll ever be entirely lopsided one way or the other, because the more that government and ATF and FBI like they make these tools and technology, and originally, even if it's used to kind of control people, I really do think that a lot of the times it gets leaked out just unintentionally because they don't know what the hell they're doing, because there's so little trust with other people and even within their own departments, that one of the other stories too in OKC, in this place called Elohim City, which is where all of these extremists apparently gather and they figure out how to like teach each other to make, you know, ordinances and stuff. But that you could have gone there any given day and there might have been like 80% 3-letter agencies and 20% people that were brought there by the 3-letter agencies. And then like they're all like suspicious of each other because the CIA is not telling the ATF that they're there, and the same with the FBI. Like no one's telling them they're there because they're all undercover. So now they're like actually on like standoffs and they're reporting back about this crazy stuff. This new guy just showed up and he said he's going to do something real big, but like he's just reporting on the FBI. So I think that there's so much to that happening that as much as they want to like, and I say they as like the 3 letters, want to attack, you know, civilians and take away power and freedom and everything, every tool that they use just ends up being used against them. AI is a really good example. I think like the whole meme warfare internet is a really good example where it was made for, you know, transmitting information between government academic agencies, and now people are using it to talk about Pizzagate. So it's like it's a double-edged sword always. So I don't think that it's going to keep getting worse in that there's some logical conclusion where we're all just in prison cells and FEMA camps. But I'm talking from the perspective of a Second Amendment loving American. If you're listening to this outside of America and you don't have a Second Amendment, you are totally screwed, my friend.
Well, good for them. They can just come down through the southern border and come right in. They'll give them enough money to go
Right.
load up.
They
on
give you
all.
a gun on the way in, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. They're, hey, welcome, welcome. Yeah. So is it getting worse that we're going to end up in FEMA camps and things like this? Are going to turn all the Walmarts into, you know, holding cells? I don't think that's happening this year. I hope not. Do I think that the information warfare is going to get worse? I do think one good thing about the internet that we have now and like the voices and people chiming out and even on Twitter that they've tried World War III like 10 times in the last 2 years.
They'll
And the
get
people
there.
are I know they will get there. They will wear us down eventually. But like Iran shot down a drone underneath Trump and everyone's like, we gotta go bomb Iran like this minute. And then people are like, it's a drone. Like nobody gives a shit. Like, okay, like shoot down a runway somewhere. And like they got that. And then it was like Russia and Ukraine. They're like, we need to stop Putin this minute. We need to go get Putin this minute. And it's like, all right, I one time we'll give some money to Ukraine, but now it's also kind of like, what are you guys doing again? And like they have to like keep begging and begging, come back for money. And hey, the Middle East, we need to go solve them. You're like, dude, like
We need
solve
more
here.
Netflix shows. We're running out.
Well, that's the other part too. Half of it is like people, America first, and like, can we take care of soldiers and can we take care of homeless people and like, can the middle class breathe? Can poor people get some money? And instead, it's like, oh, more tax breaks for the rich and everything. And so there's those people, and then the other ones are like, oh my god, did you see that 11 is in a new Netflix show? Can you believe that she's in? Like, oh my god, like this is amazing.
I don't know. I'm actually partial to some of that bumpkinism of like being obsessed with American pop culture because I do feel that this might be our end. This is the one that no one's expecting. They think that this is the program that keeps us docile, but by using entertainment back against the system, I think that's I mean, and this is coming from the guy that puts conspiracy theories in the comic book, so I'm a little bit biased in this regard, but I really like, for example, the Taylor Swift AI hacking debacle, where now all of a sudden like laws might be created over this. It's really interesting because now Taylor Swift is sort of at this crux of like a very incredible debate that's gonna like reverberate for centuries, right? Like what gets decided in the next, I don't know, few decades, I guess, about how AI is going to be enforced, who has access to it, how it's going to be trained. We already see a trajectory on that path, right? But I think that this is just showing like how scared that everyone is. Like, oh no, you can't use pop culture back against us. You can't use this for your own means. Like, this is a one-way street. This is supposed to be like a diode. You're not allowed to feed energy back into the system in this direction, in this way. So I actually think that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle skins in Fortnite, yes, it's weaponized nostalgia where it's going to be used to extract money from you because you're like, I'll make this exception because I have affinity towards the Ninja Turtles, but don't come with that anime crap with me. You know what I mean?
Right? Yeah.
But if you all of a sudden are like, well, now I'm gonna put on I'm gonna use AI to generate an episode of Ninja Turtles where they uncover that McVeigh was really just a plant by the CIA, and now people are interested because again they've got affinity towards Ninja Turtles, so they might actually sit through it, whereas they would never watch it if it were just some random documentary. And this is where I think like pop culture, whoever the guardians of it, are a little bit concerned because it's like, crap, we've got all this invested. Imagine Star Wars starts coming out and like there's an anti-vax Star Wars movie that starts getting popular, right? That's the kind of thing that they do not want to allow at all.
Darth Vader's going around the universe making sure everyone's vaxxed. Luke Skywalker is like, I refuse to get vaxxed. We have to fight against these people.
If it was done well, man, think about how powerful that really could be. Like the meme warfare, I think has them scared more than anything. And this kind of goes into like an inversion of the court jester, where originally the court jester, since he was employed by the court, he was allowed to make fun of the king more than anyone else, but he also kind of had a script. Like he knew where the line was, and probably if it was smart enough, didn't walk up to the line. But if you can just be like a freelance jester and be like, I'm going to dance on that line, I'm going to, do backflips over the line, that's where it gets scary. And now it's not like the Middle Ages where they can just be off with your head in the public square. Like you might end up, in a car bloodied with scratches all over yourself, and then it gets ruled like a suicide or the cameras turn off, whatever. That's one avenue of it. But it's a lot harder if all of a sudden a bunch of comedians just start offing themselves left and right.
You'll end up like the Boeing whistleblower.
I mean, people like you are always cherry picking these little one-offs and trying to use it like that's the whole premise. Come on.
Yeah. Even so with him, I didn't research too much into how he died, and I just saw that it was a suicide. Like, is there that much heat coming to him being a whistleblower that it's like something to be ashamed of? Like I guess that's just like where I was confused of. Like other people, you're trying to take out like high targets, I guess this is a high value company, so they're going to have their
Well, some extra
economic
context
hitmen.
here that Boeing was bailed out by the government so many times that they effectively had turned into like a government ancillary company. Like they might be called Boeing and it might be listed as a private company, but really that was like wholly owned, like a subsidy of the military. So when someone says, "Oh, this guy came out and talked about Boeing," just rephrase that as this guy came out and talked about the military. And now all of a sudden, the suicidal nature of this thing comes a little bit more into context than if like, oh, the like a disgruntled Delta employee was found on the kitchen floor of his sad apartment with his 12 cats around him. It's like, okay, yeah, I understand that, but when you say it was a military operation, it has a different connotation to it.
Yeah, so my pushback on that is like Snowden coming out with Vault 7. Like that is suicided worthy, to get him and be like, so the US government can go on anybody's computer, make it look like it was hacked from any direction and point to any country, and it's all done within government computers. Like none of this even happened. Like that's kind of breaking news. Or Boeing, you can just turn on the news and be like, oh, a door blew off. Oh, an engine is on fire. Oh, one is leaking jet fuel as it's taking off. Like this guy wasn't really breaking news. He was just kind of coming out and being like, "Oh, the mechanics certified their own work. Like, hey, change the tire. How's it look? Oh, well, looks good to me. Move on." And like signing as the worker and as the supervisor. Yeah, so I get it's a government agency. I also would say on the grand scale of whistleblowers, it seems pretty low.
Yeah, he might not be Vince Foster level, right? He might not be Lee Harvey Oswald, or sorry, Jack Ruby level, but he's on the spectrum. We can at least say that.
Yeah, but it always is interesting, and it's not like a certain former president and his wife from Arkansas who have this, this list around them of 100 people who are close to them who have all died in mysterious circumstances. Like
I've
that's a
got a
little
song
more of
about
a
that.
you got a song. Yeah, I love it. It was was that in Living Color? He's like, "Wow, I wrote a song about it. Do you want to hear it? Oh, you can just break into tune right now." But that stuff is fascinating. These people, that certain couple, allegedly, that like they get to sit there and be like, oh no, just a darn shame, just a darn shame that the 15 Secret Service agents, that all of our accountants, that the chief of staff, all these people have just mysteriously died in like horrible suicides or just unsolved murders.
I remember too in the early 2000s, the one of the most dangerous fields of work you could get into was microbiology, and it had nothing to do with like accidentally getting contaminated, but there was like an incredible spike over like a 2 or 3 year period where all of the nation's top leading microbiologists were like driving off of cliffs and like locking themselves into their cars and drowning, kind of like Mitch McConnell's wife. Like there's all these instances where people that were otherwise at the top of their fields, fairly academic, were just dying in like the most mundane ways left and right. And that was a really early conspiracy theory that I remember even people in the military were spreading it around like, yo, this is crazy.
Yeah. So just to clarify, that was McConnell's wife's sister who did that. And the good news is McConnell just became unfrozen right now, and someone was able to tell him the news, and he's very sad.
And they freeze him again. They unfreeze him to tell him the bad news, and then as soon as he feels bad about it, they freeze him so he's locked into that.
Just locked into it. Oh my God, dude. These people like, oh, I was talking to this guy yesterday and he's a paranormal investigator and he's in California. And he's like, oh, we do these home investigations, but then we have these people fill out these charts and make sure, whole background on them, gets a little personal, medications that you're on. So this guy called and he's like, there are celebrity lookalikes following me and they're putting cameras in my house. And I was like, before you get to the end of the story, because I know it's not going to go how I want, I was like, I want to talk to this guy about celebrity clones who are following him around. And then it had like a darker twist at the end. They didn't investigate and he had like mental health issues. But you, you have McConnell frozen. Most people would on both sides would be like, hey, can we get this guy some help? He needs something. But instead, re-election, just good, just good. He can't veto anything if he can't speak.
There's also a really interesting dynamic here that when you've got, like Uncle Joe up there sort of, sundowning and doesn't know which way to turn, there's almost like a pity of like, how dare you start criticizing this frail, human being? Like, have some humanity. Like, let's not even bring about, like, let him have his own dignity and like let him ride this out. And I think it's genius. It's genius to kind of like put, like, what if you put up, like Tiny Tim up there, or like, I don't know. There's so many other ways that you put Trump up there, right? And he's he just slammed like a Big Mac, and he's like golden, and he's got like the gold Rolex and everything, and he's like so flamboyant that it's so easy to tear him down and to be on board and tearing him down. But like, yeah, Uncle Joe or Mitch McConnell or any of these other sort of decrepit people that look like they're literally being controlled by drones, that are just like opening and closing the flaps on their face. I think that there's built-in pity that translates directly to political capital that's not being discounted here. There's probably an AI program that's analyzing Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden every day and giving them like an exact amount, kind of like the Weight Watchers points, right? Like you can make this many more gaffes today because you look this pitiful.
That's why they call a lit at 9 in the morning. They're like, oh, okay, Biden's up at 8 a.m. and a lit at 9, and he will not talk to anybody else. He hit his 3 gaffes. They had her, the investigator, HUR, the investigator who was looking into, he was asking Biden about these classified documents and things, and they just had a hearing yesterday in front of Congress, and they were questioning him because he came out and was like, yeah, like Biden had classified documents, but also he's a forgetful old man who didn't seem to have ill intent. So one side is like, oh, he's got dementia, we got to get rid of him. The other side's like, well, no, he said he didn't do anything wrong, and like, look how nice he is. And in this interview, he's like, I've got a Corvette, and it goes like he's a 4-year-old little boy. It's amazing. So as they're going up there, and now you have Republicans trying to like pounce and be like, hey, like he has dementia, we need to get rid of him. The other side's like no, he's just nice and forgetful, but like he would never have dementia. Like, okay, so if he's not forgetful and he's sharp as a tack, is he guilty now? Because that's what the report is saying. And it's just really like we just live. And all they want, both sides want the same thing. They just want Ukrainian money that they can launder. And it is just like we're stuck in this hell. It's man.
I think a better analogy here, it's like Mr. Magoo. Like anyone that ever got mad at Mr. Magoo was always the bad guy. Like they were always in the wrong for getting mad at Mr. Magoo because everything worked out for the better in his case. It was almost like Voltaire has this book called Candide, which is like anything that happens is always the best of any possible outcome. It's this like naive, like ever flowing optimism. But this represents kind of what you're describing here. It's not about like, oh, but he didn't mean it. It's because look at Mr. Magoo. Like you can't be mad at Mr. Magoo the same way that if you get angry at Jon Stewart for telling you how it is, it's like, well, you're getting angry at a clown, and that means that you're the asshole now, right? Like anyone that gets angry at the clown just doesn't get the joke. They're not smart enough to get the joke. And I feel like there's a Mr. Magoo dynamic with Joe Biden.
Do you think he really knows what he's going on, and just like with some different prescription glasses, he would just be able to see better and not like walk off the cliff?
I don't know if it matters, man. I feel like it's like how they would train flatworms to navigate a maze. All it would take is just a little gentle like electricity, just a little bit of a current on your right side to be like, oh, I'm not going to go that direction. And then, you'd start wandering to the left, and then the current flows. Oh, I'm not going to go in that direction anymore. I mean, how much, decision making is going on? How much awareness is going on? You're just knowing that, oh, every time I look to the right, I feel a little tingle. And every time I go to that left, that I get a little tingle. That's pretty much, I think, where we're at.
Electrical shocks and magnets. Like something's just pulling me forward. I'm going to keep going in that direction. There's just a giant magnet on the other side trying to get him over there.
Have you ever seen a remote control cockroach, like the real ones? That's literally what they do is they put little electrodes into their brain, and they just send little currents so that it makes it look like you're steering it left and right, but really it's just trying to avoid this weird feeling it's getting on one side and trying to avoid it. But I mean, if you do that with Joe Biden, right, you've just got like a chocolate chip on one side and I don't know, a bike on the other side, and you can just kind of like easily steer him without as invasive as the electrodes.
So you put the I love that you even went chocolate chip. You put that on one side, you put the bike on the other, and maybe you put a small child in front of him so he knows which direction to keep going. Like freshly washed hair, and he has to get over there and smell it.
This was actually earned me one of my strikes on YouTube, but I've got a really fun video that was, and it was in the early days of AI videos, so it had a lot of people fooled. But now if you played it, everyone would like see the telltale signs. But this is like a year and a half ago. And I had this video where Joe Biden speaks out against people criticizing him of sniffing, little children's hair. And he was basically making a very compelling argument of like, who doesn't like the smell of fresh blueberries in the morning? Like, what kind of monster doesn't want to smell what like vanilla raspberry honey might be like? And just the fact that it's on a little girl's head, like it was designed to be on her head. Like you're the monster for walking by and smelling blueberries and not wanting to stop and sniff that.
Right, like my kid's shampoo has like the wildest smells. Like it's like watermelon, strawberry, but they don't make those flavors for adults. So he's just like, what are you talking about, man? Like, this reminds me of being, hey, listen here,
Yeah, it's like
Jack, the reason I'm doing this.
back in the candy store. Hey, I'll give you 5 cents for that one in the corner.
Yeah.
And for the water, that's how he orders the children. Actually, he just says like, "I'll have a watermelon strawberry today, please."
That's Pizzagate there, man. Hey, everything circles back. That's crazy. So you said you like to give some of these conspiracies some room to breathe before you go back and start taking them under your control of how you're going to incorporate them into your work. Maybe some more information, some more research, and things like that. What is the newest one that you've started diving into? Like, what is that time frame?
American Revolution is probably one of the newer ones. No, I'm just I'm just kidding about Mary. No, probably Oklahoma City is probably there because I actually lived through that one. And I haven't really approached 9/11 with any sort of intention yet, just because it is like our generation's JFK in that it has so many freaking angles that would just be impossible to cover them all in one lifetime. And there's so many more people that have been doing it for decades at this point. But I would love to touch on that one. But yeah, I'd probably say like I'm working my way into the 90s. I'm sort of on like whenever our pop culture, makes it over to a third world country, that's like my conspiracy timeline as well.
So the third world country has all their, like the Lakers won the championship last year, instead of, the team that did, they have the reject shirts and everything. And you're over there like, oh, okay, this
yeah,
is
they're all
fine.
getting Big Johnson and Massimo shirts at this point.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
these are my people. Yeah. You just need a contact in like Zimbabwe. Like, hey man, what are you watching on TV right now? I'm like, oh, Seinfeld just came out. It's, episode 1. This is crazy.
the biggest thing about that too, though, is that like in my mind, and this isn't like a financially good approach, but like this ambulance chasing aspect of conspiracy theorists has never really appealed to me. I was always more into like, tell me about those old ancient, like, like mystery cults and how those are influencing today's politics. But man, it's almost like a feeding frenzy. It's like when you throw a little bit of duck food in the water and like all the ducks like rush in to get like the 3 or 4 pellets. And there's just so much noise that I feel like I'd rather just let all that noise be like fodder for what I come up with. Cause like when I come out with for example, I just started working on a pamphlet on the Titanic. That's fairly old. One on the Bigfoot conspiracies, which they're getting new again, but for the most part, the Patterson footage from like the 70s, I don't think anything is really like fully broken out since then. And I'm doing one on the Satanic Panic, which again was like 80s, 90s. So I think that anything that I grew up with in my childhood is sort of like the most recent that I feel comfortable enough like doing a full deep dive into.
So I do think the Patterson Gimlet film is the best video evidence of Bigfoot. Even if there's some newer footage, it's always just kind of a blur either way. You're like, well, it is a gorilla like blur, but you don't know. What did you come out of that thinking? Are you a Bigfoot believer?
No, I mean, the short story, no, but I'm more open to it now after having writ the Bigfoot pamphlet and talking to quote unquote Bigfoot experts out there. It's just there's so many questions that are just unresolved. Like, but one of the biggest questions is what is it about the Patterson Gimlin footage that makes that still one of the better versions of any footage that we've got, almost in direct correlation, like indirect correlation to how proficient people are getting with having a camera on them, higher quality, better low light conditions. The same with ghosts and orbs, right? It's like miraculously, once everyone had more cameras of better quality, ghost sightings go down when they used to be all pervasive, when everyone just had, like, when it was almost relegated to just rich people that had, handy cams, all of a sudden everyone's got them. But when all the Poe people have cameras, it goes away. And that one is just like it doesn't get around. And the most common description is that, oh well, Bigfoot is sort of like telekinetic. He also might be able to like be telepathic and know that if you've got a camera on you, he'll just avoid you. He might be interdimensional. So even if you see him, your camera can't see him. And then it's like, okay, so I guess in the 70s or the 80s, we had this analog technology that bypassed, but now that we've got like, high versions of, digital sensors, Bigfoot's like, oh, I know how to bounce around that one. He's like bobbing and weaving the light waves around. So that's where some of it loses me because of this Patterson Gimlin. Like, why is that still the best footage? That's a good reason.
I feel like NASA could answer this question better for you on how the technology, even though it's gotten better, that it's
Yeah.
harder for them to land on the moon again. I think that would be like better for them to answer that. I do. So I live in New Jersey. I'm on the foot of the Pine Barrens here.
I'm sorry.
Oh, New Jersey's great, man. I live in the. I'm close to everything. What
I
part of the
love my
country?
FEMA camp. It's the bars are great here.
New Jersey. It wasn't terrible. And when they had their lockdown and everything, I'm in the suburbs. I have a yard. I have all the stuff. Worked from home during the whole time. So it wasn't. This isn't the free state of Florida. This isn't the free state of Texas. I get all of that. We can't just walk around with AKs on our back and just go hang out and shoot our barbecue as we want it. But in general, for being a heavy blue state, a bluish state, there are some red pockets. But for being a blue state, it wasn't as terrible as you would think. Anyway, foot of the Pine Barrens, New Jersey, great. I interviewed this guy who's a Bigfoot researcher, goes out and things. So like 3 miles from my house, he has seen Bigfoot a few times. He's heard him growl in his ear. He saw him cross the road. He has found footprints. So at first, I was very against it being in the Pine Barrens. But as he talked about it, I was like, I think in heavily wooded areas, it is more likely. It is also very strange that I can drive around any given time and see a dead deer, a dead skunk, a dead porcupine or possum or whatever on the side of the road, and you never see a dead Bigfoot. Like some semi truck didn't just run him over. Like I find that a little harder to believe. But hey, since he can see that you have a camera in your pocket, it's probably pretty easy to avoid like the roadways and things like that.
Well, I mean, think about all of the experienced hunters that are out there that have been specifically hunting Bigfoot for decades now, right? And one of my favorite questions when I talk to them is if you're a Bigfoot hunter, like, are you going to shoot Bigfoot? Like, are you shooting the kill? And then what are you doing with the bot? Like, because in my mind, that's the ultimate payday. If you were actually able to say, here's the dead body of a Bigfoot, scientists have at it. Well, like, what's the downside of that? But usually the explanation is you can't shoot him because he's interdimensional. You can't shoot him because he knows you have a gun. Or if you do shoot him, the men in black show up immediately. Like it's an episode of Yellowstone and you just killed like a endangered wolf. And then you just get surrounded and then they take Bigfoot from you and you never get seen or heard from again. But again, like in the modern day of someone saying, hey, I'm live on Twitch. Here I am, low light conditions on my cell phone that everyone has. Hey, look, there's Bigfoot. Bam, I shot him. It kind of gets rid of the men in black angle. So I really I'm waiting to see someone with like a legitimate Bigfoot, cadaver as proof of this. And if there's no proof of it, it's almost like the ghost thing. Like, why do we see less ghosts now reported in the media than we did in the 80s and 90s? And it's because, everyone could film it now. So, like, how are you going to do it and then prove that it's a real? Because I don't know. It's one of those avenues that doesn't get brought up enough with skepticism, I think. Because I remember growing up, I felt like the new advances in technology and growing up with Ghostbusters and everything, like we were going to prove ghosts were real at some point because we'd have AI to do it, or we have some special hologram scanning device that would do it. But the opposite has happened. If anything, we've just been proving that they're not around. And then if you say that, then you're part of big anti-ghost or something. I don't know what the conspiracy is for suppressing ghosts and suppressing Bigfoot, but
Yeah, I'm not sure that is for a hunter. I don't know how like if you shot a bear, like you're gonna drag that out. Like I just don't understand like in your mind how you're gonna move this 1,000+ pound thing that is just like completely
well, you
dead
call
weight.
the news crews, right? If you shot a Bigfoot, you would call the news crews and you'd just be like, just put the money here. Here's a pallet. Here's 20 pallets. Just start loading the money on top of this because I found this creature that people have been looking for all over the world for centuries. And here's your proof.
You're gonna so like it'll be like the NAMBLA, but for Bigfoot, like Bigfoot American Bigfoot Lovers Association. They're like, how dare you shoot him? We just love him as a creature. You're self-canceled. You can't do that.
I think Bigfoot mixed with Nambla is one of the scariest images I've ever conjured up.
Feel free to use it in your next episode
Yeah.
that you're creating. That's it.
That Bigfoot Nambla niche. It's a huge
Yeah.
demo right now.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on the newest UFO stuff that came out? Like in 2017, they said, "Hey, UFOs are real," and now just last week, the Pentagon investigated themselves and said, "Hey, we looked into it. UFOs are not real, and this is all, Earth technology."
I feel like it is all Earth technology. I'm sort of not big on aliens, man. I think that if there was an alien race that was smart enough to somehow bypass the rules of physics and interdimensional travel and light travel, and they found a way to like have a food or energy source that was competent of being able to survive whatever travel that would entail, they were definitely smart enough to not come anywhere near our planet, right? It would be like, I don't know, like just like having the best auto driving Tesla car and every doodad and a connection to Skynet and everything, and then getting lost in like the hood and then getting robbed. It's like you had the technology to prevent that from ever happening to you. And I do feel like Earth would be like the worst hood that the aliens could accidentally like go into a 3-point turn in.
Maybe they were dared, or it was like a gang initiation.
Well, that or like, yeah, this is like the Fight Club where it's like go start a fight out in public. So this
And
is just
lose,
someone
right?
like, oh, these
Yeah.
assholes deserve it. I'll go and punch that guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's life on other planets. Interdimensional, that's just fascinating on its own.
What is that life? Would you say that that's like a piece of bacteria or like a mold spore, or are you
No,
saying
I think
life
that's
like
given. No, I think mold spores are on every planet. I would, if I had to say that there were microbes and things like that, the building blocks of life, I would say you could find that anywhere. Now, I have
so
no
intelligent
think.
life?
And there you go. I think intelligent life is on planets. Like there's a good billion of them right now. Somewhere has one. How does it get here? I don't know. Are the UFOs in the skies? Some of them, I would say, are certainly U.S. government, foreign government, China, Russia government ships and planes. They're always, not always, for the most part, though, they're over military installations near them, near high access areas. Like, okay, that sounds kind of military to me. But the interdimensional thing, we live in the Spider-Verse realm now where everything's possible and there's 500 dimensions going on. Like that gets a little harder to understand. But then, you see something like Skinwalker Ranch as a TV show, I think it's like half bullshit. But then Skinwalker Ranch, like when Bigelow was there and talked about it and like he kind of got out of it. Like those stories come out of there, I kind of find fascinating.
Well, I think weird things happen. I think that's definitely a given. The Skinwalker Ranch is a decent example because it reminds me of like the Treasure of Oak Island, and they're on like season whatever. And it's like if there was treasure, it would have been like one episode, they find the treasure and then it's over, right? But the fact that it's this like long running TV series, it's almost means that they can't be a treasure there because there wouldn't be a show if there were a treasure there.
You don't understand. They were so advanced before. They built all these things. So as you dug deeper, it just filled in more. It's like, okay, do we have sonar, LiDAR? Do you have metal detector? Can you just shove one down there and figure it out? When that show first came out, it was almost like what's the UFC guy who's ex-military? I think he lives in Texas. He was on Rogan all the time. He did Hunting Hitler on History Channel.
I know who you're talking about. I don't know his name.
Yeah. But so he did Hunting Hitler. And it was, did Hitler escape to South America and they're in Argentina and all this stuff? And oh, there's a U-boat sunk in here. But like every episode, they never really answered anything. They would find, some German writings or like German style buildings. But like Germans also went to Argentina in general. And we never got this answer. And like the more seasons it went, like we're never getting this. And Oak Island seems like a one season series of like, hey, let's dig in here and find out. But now, we're in season 85, and it's like you're still in this. Didn't you dig it all up already? Like, isn't it gone?
Well, the Hunting Hitler is another good example because I think it buries the lead a little bit because it's like, was Hitler some sort of magical Merlin, being that wherever he went, he had this like magical ability to like restart another Reich? Or was he just a figurehead at the top of this like much bigger movement? And if you say like, okay, well, let's not care about Hitler specifically, there was definitely Nazi rat lines that went into Argentina and Chile. There's huge groups of people that are still like blonde haired and blue eyed in the middle of the jungle, essentially. One of them is there was a movie with Hermione that starred in it. It's called Colonio Dignidad, which stands for Dignity Colony. I actually have a comic book on this too. But like to me, that is far more interesting that there really is evidence of like wholesale just exporting of Nazis, not just there. I mean, Project Paperclip, right?
I was gonna say, yeah, I mean,
Paperclip is infinitely more fascinating to me than whether or not Hitler made it out of the country alive. Who cares? Okay, great. He made it out of the country alive. Even if Mengele made it out alive and went underground and still did experimentation, the scale of what he was able to do in Germany is really what was fascinating. And the fact that everyone just gets passes when they bring them over to the States, they like cross through, like I guess they get baptized on the way over. They like dunk their heads and they get here and they're like free of sin.
so Tim Kennedy was the MMA fighter and the star of Hunting Hitler. I forgot his name.
Did
So
they ever find him? Did he just like punch him? to
I
death.
think he kept punching the corpse over and over.
You
I think
find
Hitler
like a
just,
like a 110-year-old man. He's like barely alive,
I've
and
got
just
him. Yeah. It's like, why aren't you answering me? Like, stop hitting Joe Biden. But it also goes back to, so Project Paperclip, that they bring all the Nazis over here, wipe their records, put them in charge of NASA, and then there's a photo of these guys in Florida, and they're wearing all their uniforms. It was after they got here, so it was like, hey, we just did this rocket for you, but you also want to celebrate in our old uniforms, and you're gonna let us do this here. And it's like, well, that kind of looks like maybe it was like the peak of, they were in the Alps, and like, that's the Florida Everglades. It says "Welcome to Florida" in the background right there. Like, what are you guys talking about?
dude, that's right in your, well, not in New Jersey, but really close to your neck of the woods. And we were talking about 11 and Camp Hero and Project Montauk. There was an area that was miles away. I mean, miles being relative. I mean, thousands is good, but it was like 20 miles away from where Camp Hero was on Long Island, that had roads that were still named like Goebbels Avenue and Hitler Boulevard, and it was the most concentrated area in America during World War II of pro-Nazis here in the States. So like, yeah, that in every state there was like a group of very pro German World War II peoples. It was not relegated to any specific region anywhere in the country. Like, they crazy finds crazy.
So this is, going back and saying, oh, I want to research OKC and Timothy McVeigh, and like, oh, you're white supremacist because you're supporting him. Like, no, I know more about the story, and I have to like find out about the guy and figure that out. And it's like, I am fascinated about, Nazi Germany as a whole, not for like what they did, like the horrible things, but more of like their technology that they were doing, the science that they were doing. Now, some of the conclusions they came to, some of the experiments that result in their conclusions were disgusting. The United States also had no problem taking all of that research and bringing it back here and being like, well, it's okay because we're just reading it. We're not the ones performing it, as they bring some of the same scientists to continue those things. But I think that's also kind of the magic wand they wave over you of like, you're interested in like experiments that they did. Like, no, I'm interested in the rocket technology they had. I'm interested in how they were working on Lyme's disease over there, but like infecting small fleas and things to try to get entire armies to lay down. And yet it comes over here into a tick, and it's the same guy working on it. But you can't really bring these things up.
Well, that's some of that rocket technology. It's like, oh no, I just like the sterile rocket stuff. Well, some of that included like high altitude pressure experiments where they would basically just like force people to implode, put them in big pressure tanks, and just keep cranking up the air pressure until they died from it, and be like, okay, I guess the human body can't go up to quite this amount of psi. But another thing too that gets glossed over, it's not like Germany was this like old soup that you leave in the back of the fridge and it just kind of like festers over, and you look at it and months later and it's like a weird science experiment. What they are, or what World War II Germany was about, was kind of the industrialization of the stuff that the private industry in America was already doing. All the eugenics programs and all that started in the States, or it started between us and a lot of like Swiss scientists. And Germany was just, I mean, with Hitler in power, it was just like, oh, we can make a factory that does that, and it'll be way more efficient than what you guys are. You guys are going around and asking for donations and asking for volunteers. Like, we've actually got industry here. Let's just do our German industrial thing and turn this into like a factory situation. And that was more than the world was able to handle. Like, the world was okay with the same things that Germany was doing, just if it was on a smaller private scale, right? That the second you turn that key and now it's like the public religion, then it becomes a huge international conflict that needs to be stomped out. And then as it gets stomped out, it literally just turns back into private industry again, right? It just gets reabsorbed into NASA, and it's like, okay, don't worry, like, it's back into the hands of the capitalist. Everything is fine again.
It's the things that you can't FOIA, and it's like, Germany is doing this Ford factory line of like, hey, we can produce a car faster. Instead of doing it in 2 weeks, we can do 10 cars a day if we do it this way. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Ford's a great example because Hitler had a picture of Henry Ford on his desk, and I believe Henry Ford had a picture of Hitler on his desk. So they shared a lot in common, and it was just the matter of scale.
They pen pals here? I need to see these letters. Like, dearest
They were,
Adolf,
no, they absolutely they
love,
fawned over
Hank.
each other.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's yeah. You start getting into some of the, it's funny what gets canceled now for,
Kellogg's isn't canceled. Kellogg's is still a pretty big corporation, and Kellogg's was
IBM.
doing eugenics before Hitler was even a sparkle in his mom's Jewish eye. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, they're trying to cancel Kellogg's again. Whoever makes Cheerios, they just came out and it was like 80% of the Cheerios tested had all these chemicals in there that are not supposed to happen. It's like, oh, great. Just everything that people just give their kids or, toddlers as like little snack food. It's like, oh, well, making us sterile and dumbing us down.
No one could have seen this coming. Like, what's next? If you can't even trust these global conglomerate cereal companies that were created from eugenics operations, literally called Battlemill Creek Sanitarium. I think that was the original name. It didn't have the same ring to it when you were feeding your
Harder to
child
market.
these snacks. Yeah,
Sanitarium, but God, no, it just means it's clean. It's clean, not the insane asylum.
I think it was called Battle Creek Sanitarium. That was the original name for Kellogg's cereal company.
Man, what was the focus group there to get that greenlit?
Well, that was a whole bunch of like puritanical, like semen retention stuff where like you weren't allowed to do any hanky panky at all. And you just had to become like a spiritual purist. And part of that was eating bland cereal. It was literally the reason why some of Kellogg's existed, is because they felt that food was like just too extreme, too extravagant, and it needed to have less texture, it had to have less flavor, and just kind of be something that could, keep you moving through the day. It was Soylent Green essentially of its time.
They weren't excited about Crunchberry, like this Captain guy. There's burst of flavor in your mouth. But there's
Oops, All Berries was like basically worse than the Holocaust of the Kellogg's company.
Yeah, like I can't do this. There was a Matthew Broderick movie at one point that dealt with the Kellogg's and the blandness. I forget what that was.
Wellville, something. Well, Welcome to Wellville, I think.
Yeah, that was weird times, man. Weird times. Thankfully, we're all past that, and everything's on the up and up, and nothing's being hidden.
There's no more weirdos that run like cereal companies anymore, which is a good thing.
Or pizza places. Don't worry about that. So I appreciate you coming on. What do you have in the works? What's coming up next? Where can people find you?
So I got 3 big things coming up. The first big one is chosenone.com. It's issue 2 to an ongoing series that basically features podcasters, real life conspiracy theory podcasters. Issue 2 has got, I don't know if you know any of these names, but it's got Gordo from Those Conspiracy Guys podcast.
Oh, yeah, good one.
It's got Alex Stein, Primetime 99, the Pimp on a Blimp. He makes a cameo in it. It's also got Sam Tripoli and his fam XG and Johnny.
Johnny on the ones and twos.
Mark Steves from My Family Thinks I'm Crazy. Like, it just got nonstop conspiracy theorists. And the idea is that every episode keeps bringing more and more people into the fold and kind of establishing the equivalent of a Marvel universe, but all the characters are podcasters that you actually know out in the sphere, but they also get superpowers and stuff. So that's a really fun one. That's going to be this ongoing project at chosenone.com. I've also got an all ages project that I've been working on with Sam Tripoli directly called Chaos Twins, which is an all ages comic about 2 girls that move into a new town. And it's very influenced, almost like X-Files and Erie, Indiana meets sort of like a modern twist, but they become friends with Bigfoot and Chupacabras and the Moth Girl. And they basically end up fighting reptilian shapeshifters and New World Order ice cream men. So it's like they're fighting back against this weaponized nostalgia that like we're talking about. Imagine like a new wave of like a new generation that doesn't have affinity to all the stupid crap they're selling to us to like give back to our kids. That's kind of the universe that Chaos Twins operates in. And then I've got on the complete other end of that, an adult series coming out called Illuminati. And it's adultoccult.com for an easy way to get to it. And it's basically 4 different issues, a brand new anthology series that basically it's where erotica meets esoterica. So I don't know if you've ever heard the theory that Aleister Crowley might be like the grandpa of George Bush because he might have had some hanky-panky with Barbara Bush's mom, Pauline Pierce.
Right before we came on, I was just texting with a buddy about that because we were talking about Marcon's wife in France, and that Candace Owens is like, that's a dude. and so then my buddy was like, what's with all these, hey, these women who are dudes like in power? And I was like, oh, just like Crowley was running a train on Barbara Bush's mom, and she's a dude. I was like, oh wait, maybe that was too much.
And that was in Paris, but that was actually a comic that's in that series. There's 12 pages fully illustrated with Crowley's dong and all of its glory. Just because it was one of those things where like, if I don't do this, no one else is going to do it. And there's another in that series that's about John Dee and Edward Kelly that were summoning angels. And one of the angels told them that they needed to swap wives in order to gain some kind of knowledge. So again, this is illustrated in all of its full, X-rated glory. So that's another new big project I've been working on.
I am glad that it was you that had to take the undertaking of Crowley's dong, and like it wasn't like the Jeff Goldblum of like they didn't stop to ask if they can do it. Like before they did it, you were just like, "Hey man, I'm here."
Those are the tame ones too, by the way. It gets really weird.
I'm not going to ask how much research you did into dongs to find out, like how it should go. So
Well, I
that's on
mean,
you.
funny you mentioned that. I was saying that I just recently did a 5.5 hour podcast, and this was a marathon podcast. This was not stop and go and edit it together. This was like a 5.5 hour session with my friend Juan. This is on the Occult Book Club, but we review something called the Box Saga. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Box Saga before, but if you haven't, you will never look at a dong the same way again, my friend.
Usually it's just mine I'm looking at, so it's pretty good there. I will tread carefully into that. I don't want to have to be scared off, and if I have to pee, just like going all over the place.
Go on an
So
empty stomach.
go on an empty stomach. All right. I will tread carefully. I didn't realize you were working with Tripoli so close. So now you are the second or third Sam adjacent person that I have talked to. I am working my way up. I will somehow make it to the tinfoil hat ladder and be on the show with XG and Sammy.
Well, the real goal, as you can see from Sam, is to get a comic book created and published by Paranoid American. That's the real pinnacle. Like you're working yourself up to just get back to me at the end. You don't even know it yet.
That's the whole circle. I'm gonna come back like it's you at the top. Like
Yeah.
you told me this years ago. That's it. But hey, man, I wish you the best of luck. I had an awesome time here. You're welcome back. Shoot the breeze, newest conspiracy, the newest old one. We don't want to deal with the new ones that are. I follow them. They'll come on, and I also give them like 5 days to breathe before whatever like the newest thing is, because there's just like so much crap thrown there, and then half of them just like dissipate on their own, and it's like not even worth putting your thought into. But the newer ones that come out, they're crazy. And going back and look at the old ones, and like you can just see how they've gotten better. Like the government's like, oh, we should change our shoes before we go infiltrate, the Antifa people instead of just wearing like property of like, New York City police.
It is. That's a really good analogy, actually. If you go back and you watch like the footage from Waco and Ruby Ridge and OKC and like just how the ants would scatter, right? And all of the official footage, it's almost like going back and watching movies from the 70s and 80s. It's like, okay, they knew what they were doing, but clearly the advances in technology and just overall knowledge, people start to pick up on these little things. And over time, it's like, wow, I can't believe the production quality. And I think that's where we're at. Like the production quality has been elevated by the three-letter agencies. So it's almost beyond just the military industrial complex. It's like a military industrial entertainment complex, which is good for us because we get to enjoy it as it's happening to us.
So they need like this committee. So they're gonna go through your comic and look at the top, conspiracy podcasters and like, oh, we need to bring these guys in, run the idea past them, let them workshop it. I'm like, no. Like you have to make sure it's like truly black. Like that's brown black. They wouldn't wear that, and then they'll just pick all, nitpick away until they have the perfect thing here. Then they won't be able to get traced back to them.
Yeah, I'm open. If the government wants to contract me again, I've got a long track record. I worked for the military. I've done work for, Lockheed Martin. Like you can count on me. I worked for Disney for 10 years. I'm a Freemason. I'm the inside guy. You can trust me. Give me the money.
Like, I am here for this. My price may have gone up since I've left the
Yeah.
military. It may be a little higher. So when I first started podcasting, like the first week I started, one of my buddies, his friend has a very successful college football podcast, and he's been on the Ringer with Bill Simmons and ESPN. So I got in touch with him, just kind of pick his brain. And I think maybe I had like maybe 6 episodes up at that time. And he's like, how many listens are you getting to? So I gave him my number, which wasn't that great. And he's like, dude, I've known people doing this for years. Like that number's like really good. He's like, you'll find out like your friends and family don't listen as much as you think. Like, hey, did you hear my like I don't care about your new episode. Like I've moved on. He's like, that number's pretty good. He's like, I had a buddy who was trying to get a government grant. I think it was $100,000 or $500,000 to as like an advertisement for his podcast. Like he put in for it, and like his numbers were like 20 people per episode. And he's like, you don't even have anything yet, and you're already like way past that. So I'm going to wait for the next grant cycle to come through to see if the government's giving me some money. I too am for hire. I will let you get your cut first. You already put it out there first. But if they have extra money, I'm here for that too.
Yeah, and if there is like a spirit cooking version of HelloFresh, like I'm your guy. I've got that niche. The demographics already follow me everywhere I go. So
Like you have to go out and get your own lettuce. You have to go get your own meat. Like, what if it was just delivered to you in general, like a small child's lock of hair, some fresh blood, a little piece of, milk-fed veal that has like no muscle on it whatsoever. This could just come in the box for you with your own creepy artwork, a poster you just hang up right away.
well, I'm thinking more like pitted pineal glands that maybe come in a little bit of olive oil. Something nice, something with like some garlic.
I think
Some
that's the
walnut
way
salt.
to go. So yeah, we'll have to think of a better name. The Hello Fresh like spinoff. I think that's hysterical. You should definitely put that in the comic. But hey, I sincerely
Oh, you did order again, like the DoorDash for the Clinton family.
Yeah, having it delivered to Sam. Like this is Hillary Clinton. This isn't me. What's in here? That'll definitely work. Hey man, I sincerely appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. You have a great day.
Thanks, you too, man.
All right, take care.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. That was our show. Don't forget to leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you stream your podcast. Like and follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date in all things wild and weird. Check out the links in the show notes for more information on our guest. The biggest support you can offer is to tell everyone about the podcast. Until next time.